is. Welcome to the PokerRoad Radio Show, hosted by Gavin Smith, Joe Seabach, and Bart Hansen. PokerRoad Radio is the only radio show that cares about Canada, or even knows where it is.
Well, here we are at Niagara Falls, the very first WPT Final Table Preview on PokerRoad Radio. I'm Bart Hansen here with Barry Greenstein and Gavin Smith, and this is really special because one of the co-hosts is actually on the final table. Barry Greenstein breaking the Joe Seabach curse, actually getting there into sixth. You're at 447,000. You are the short stack. The player that actually went out was the final woman in the table, Cheryl DeLeon. She lost a big race to Kofi Farkey, and he's been up and down, ace-queen versus pocket nines. What did you see in between dinner break and now? What were some of the things that happened at the table?
I don't remember anything except that I tried to bluff Scott Clements when 4 clubs came up on the board, and he called me down with second pair. And so I lost 500,000 on that pot, and that's I guess I would have been the short stack anyway, but now I'm even shorter than I would have been.
And how did that hand go down?
I just raised on the button with ace jack, and he called, and the flop came queen high with all clubs, and I bet, and he called, and I said he's either got a queen or an eight. It came queen eight small, and on the turn a king came, so I fired again, and he called, and so I said, okay, maybe he's got a club, maybe he doesn't. I'm going to have to read the river whether I want to fire again. And when the club came off on the river, I read that he didn't like it and thought he was beat. And so I said, okay, I don't want to dog it here. And sometimes I feel like I have to fire all 3 barrels, especially when I read that the guy is unhappy and that's not what he was going for. And I bet enough on the turn that he might not have played a flush draw, especially not the nut flush draw, or he might have played it faster. There are a lot of factors there. And the hand before, when I was in the small blind, I gave him a walk in the big blind because he had just lost a big pot and he was steaming. And I knew he was ready to play against me, or against anyone actually. He was ready to play, and one way to play is to call someone down. So I understood that he called me on the turn saying, I'm hoping I still have the best hand. When the club came, it's just one of those situations where I just said, okay, let's see if he'll call the third barrel. And I fired it, and he called with second pair. And it took so much out of him. Normally the person who loses gets out of their chair or maybe takes a few hands off. He left. He called, he got up, and he left the room. And he didn't come back for a few hands because he was so
he ran to the restroom.
He was so elated. Yeah, right. So I put the pressure on him, and he came through. So he outplayed me there.
Now, how many WPT championships have you won?
I'm listed as winning 2, but I actually only count as 1.5 because one of them was the Invitational.
So were you ever in this spot going into the final table as a short stack?
I think so. I don't know how many. I've made several final tables, and I vaguely recall that I've been the short stack before, but I don't know. You'd have to look that stuff up.
I was 5th in chips when I went into the Mirage, and only slightly ahead of 6th.
Pulled it out. I mean, you just got to get a little bit lucky, get your chips in good?
I mean, they're still playing this. I mean, the blinds are only at 12 and 24,000. Barry's got 448,000. It's not like he's out of this tournament. And the structures for WPT final tables have changed now. So that they won't go to this racing structure that they used to do, and they're going to stick with the tournament structure that they've got posted. So, I mean, they're going to be playing 90. As far as I think that means you're going to keep playing 90 minutes level.
I certainly hope so. Obviously, the longer they play, the better it is for me.
I mean, I don't. I mean, it obviously you go in there thinking you're 6th, but I mean, when you still got 20 big blinds, you're still got lots of play. You're still the best player at the table. I mean, there's obviously. I don't think there's any reason not to be optimistic if you're sitting in Barry's shoes right now. I think it's a great opportunity.
Now, at the end of this show, keeping with traditions of previous shows, we are going to do predictions. And I think what we're going to do is actually, we're all going to give the order in which we think everyone's going to place. But we're going to take Barry out of the equation because I know that I'm rooting for Barry.
I'm going to root for him too, but I'm still going to do my picks.
I thought that one of the things that we do on the final test, we talk about each of the players first.
Yeah, and I was going to.
Was that first or second?
Well, we can do that. We can do that at any point.
Okay.
I actually have a question for you, though, Barry, because it's something that I've thought about a little bit over the last wee while, and it's kind of an interesting point, I think, and it sort of gets, again, kind of magnified because Cheryl got so close to getting to a final table. We're now in the 6th season of the World Poker Tour, and obviously the fields are men greatly outnumber women in the fields. But we do have a number of women that play regularly, and there are, consistently quite a few women in each field. Having gone over 100 episodes in the World Poker Tour, do you think there's any reason why we still have yet to have a woman win a WPT event?
Yeah, it's obvious. There aren't as many who play, and the average woman player is not as strong as the average male player for whatever reasons you're going to come up with. That they generally don't go into poker at a young age like we see a lot of the 17-year-old males. They're usually doing other things. Some people might say that men are more aggressive, which is good for poker in certain physiological, biological things. I'm not sure how relevant that is in poker, but the main arguments are just the numbers, and that now we're seeing some of the younger women playing. Obviously, Net 15 is the prime example, and there are others. And so eventually we'll have some women WPT champions and women main event champions, but by numbers, they just don't rate to get there.
I mean, could it also be because these main events are no-limit hold'em? And what I mean by that is if you look at the top no-limit hold'em cash game players, there aren't that many women, but you do see quite a bit of women playing limit hold'em. And maybe that goes back to what you're saying about aggression and, just the nature of the game in general.
Yeah, that's probably, aggression is a big factor. I think when you look at some of the top women players, I didn't see that much in Annette, although she's kind of a relentless. She's a pretty loose player. She gets in there and jams up. But the examples I always give are Jennifer Harmon and Mimi Tran. They're very aggressive women. If you're playing at a table with them, they're probably more likely to get in a fight than any of the men who are at the table.
Well, let's go through all these guys. And, Barry, you've been playing with most of them for all 4 days. Gavin, you were in this tournament, played with a few of them early on. Right off the bat, we had John Linnell here on the show. He's got 2.616 million. Kind of, I haven't seen him. I mean, a lot of these guys have kind of gone on roller coasters. He seems to be kind of steady. What do you look for him?
Well, it seems like in this tournament, and one thing that I think it's important to note with John Linnell is recently he had in Biloxi he had the big chip lead, and it seemed like the wheels just fell completely off, and he ended up going out in 7th place. I don't know exactly the string of events that made that happen, but I know he had an amount of chips that you would most often look back and be a little bit disgusted about not making the final table. And it really seems like in this tournament, once he got the chips, it was kind of important to him not to relinquish them back in sort of a similar fashion. And I don't know if maybe he's played a little less volatile than he normally would, but it seems like he's played a pretty steady tournament, and I think that might have had something to do with it. So.
Yeah, and I played with him the latter half of the day, and he was doing a lot of pot control. There are a few pots that he could have actually won bigger pots because he had the best hand, but he bet the flop with top pair. When he got called, he checked the turn, and if the guy bet out, he called, and sometimes showed down what he expected was the winning hand but wouldn't get paid off or made a small bet on the river. So he's been intentionally keeping the pots small, and he has so much going in. I'm not saying he got his chips that way, but at this point he wasn't trying to play big pots.
Now, Scott Clemens, he's won a couple of bracelets, won another bracelet in 07, won a bracelet in 06. He won that Canadian WPT event that was kind of a pseudo WPT event here last year, $250,000. He's a real force. It's almost like he seems to be there at the end. I mean, he was a guy that came out of Washington State, stopped playing online poker because of the legality of it, went on tour, and it's like he's on a tear. We just talked about he made 2 big calls, or he made a big call against Barry, moved Cheryl off of a hand with total air. So what do you think about him? He's got 2.4 million.
I guess right now, I mean, obviously he's had quite a day, but he's had a day that's gone up and down in chips. I mean, he was relatively low a few times. He got up there a bit, and I think what he's done is he's put himself into the action. And whether or not he felt he had something to prove, outplaying people, I don't know. The two notable hands that I think that I saw late in the day there were the hand that he made a bluff against Cheryl, and that may have just been, great picking of the player that you choose to do it against, or it might have just been, a crazy play because like Barry said about that hand, most good players are going to pick it up and they're probably going to end up making the call.
No, I didn't say most good players would pick it up, but it was something that you could see.
Right.
And I really think if the king doesn't come on the river, he's not going to get away with it. So he put a lot of chips in, drawing dead, and needing the right probably a king is the single card. If you think about it, she's ace queen. Ace doesn't work.
Right.
No overcard comes. She's the player who's going to pay him off. I think he found his 4 outs to bluff.
Right.
So
that's a little bit. So all I'm getting at there is that's a little bit of a crazy situation to get yourself into, especially in the later stages. And then you get into the other situation against Barry with where he just chooses to make the big call. And again, you're investing when your chip stack's only at about 1.2 or 1.3 million or wherever it was at that point. When you're investing 500,000, you're almost 50% of your chips to make a big call. You're starting to get yourself into situations that I think in final tables are going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And so I think that Scott had a day where things went particularly well for him, and because of that, he's ending the day with 2.5 million in chips. But you don't get that many days in poker where things go as well as that. And I think if tomorrow, if he chooses to play the same style and with the same volatility, and doesn't have a day that goes as well as today, then he could easily filter off a lot of chips very quickly.
Yeah, I disagree with a lot of things Gavin said, and here's why. I think Scott's got the table on notice that A, I'm willing to make a bluff for all my chips, 3-barrel bluff, and B, I'm willing to call a 3-barrel bluff. So he's got us all knowing that he's capable of anything, whereas the rest of the table, I think, for the most part, played carefully towards the end, waiting for people to get knocked out. So that gives him some sort of advantage that it worked. He didn't get away. He actually was down because he tried a bluff. I can't remember what the hand was exactly, but he bluffed off several hundred thousand Jonathan Little before the hand that I tried to bluff him, which is why I was kind of staying away from him a little bit because I knew he was ready to try to get those chips back, and it ended up the way the hand came out. I gave him the chips.
Of course, in third place, we have the infamous average, which is 1.680 million. David Cloutier, actually, in third place. We haven't really talked a lot about him. 1.614 million. Another one that didn't seem to really have that much of a ride. What's going on with this guy?
Well, David's the least experienced player at the table. He's a local player, and he's the one who had the ace-4 and didn't lose that much when the 4 paired against King's Full. But David's a trapper. Don't they have trappers up here in the north? Yeah. Well, David's one of them, and he often lets people bet his hand for him, and he's willing to check a couple times to get you to bet for him. And I've done it for him, and so have many of the other players. And that's why he's got 1.6 million in chips.
I know very little about David except for the fact that one of his friends who was here sweating him today came up to me on the rail and knew he knew me from somewhere, and it turned out that he knew me from David is from Brampton, Ontario, which is where I used to deal poker for MCM Poker. And I guess David played in the game with him and his buddies played in the game I used to deal once in a while, which was 5-10 limit hold'em, and then it went away after that, after 98. So I don't know how much he's even played in the last while, but I know that the guys that played in that game were really crazy. But it's one thing to be crazy in a 5-10 limit hold'em game at a WPT final table. So I don't know. It's if he's the most inexperienced, he's coming here. I'm sure it's his first time on television, and that's a lot to deal with a lot of times, and especially in front of your hometown people. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him that might be difficult for him to handle. Now,
on over into fourth place, a guy that has been on a super roller coaster ride. He was all in for his tournament life, won a big race against Cheryl, is Kofi Farkey, up to 1.5 million. Now, he was an unknown also coming in, but he is one of these, I guess, internet players. He's semi-known in the internet world. Is he the most erratic or kind of wild player at the table?
Yeah, he's very erratic. He made pretty bad call with Ace-Jack against Ace-King, calling 500,000 into a pot that was just a couple hundred thousand. And raising, a pot hand we discussed on the show, raising me out of a big win where I'd have crippled or busted Jeff Garza. But he can't get away from anything. If he has ace-jack or 2-8s or better, the money's going in. That's the one thing. But as terrible as that sounds, he puts you to the test all the time. You bring it in, he often makes it 3 times, and he puts you in one of these situations where you don't know if you should call, fold, or play back at him. And when you do finally play back at him, often you can't wait for that good hand. You're not going to knock him off either.
There's not a whole lot of fold equity.
There's not a lot of fold equity against him, so it's not like you can just say, okay, well, I had 10-9 of spades, and I'm tired of this. I'm playing back, because he's calling with ace-10 probably, so you may end up in trouble there. So he definitely, in a tournament where there's a high ante structure, which this tournament has been. Some tournaments you have a 1/5, 1/6 ante to small bet ratio. This tournament's always been 1/4, and some of them have been 1/3. And so that's a higher ante structure, so it plays perfectly into his style. And that's why we see him at the final table. And he still, with chips, he's slightly under average. He's a guy who could easily go out first and could easily get a hold of chips and win it.
I really don't have too much to offer about this.
Just any wild maniac type.
Yeah,
to counter.
I mean, they're tough guys to play against, because you're not going to run them off a pot too often. But I mean, and he's going to run you off lots of pots. I mean, he's going to look down and see King Jack and think it's the world and fire into a bunch of chips and make you lay down. A lot of hands that might be beating him. But I don't know. Typically, I think, especially now with the structure being better at the tables, I think it's harder and harder for the crazy people to overcome all they have to overcome.
Because the structure's going slower, you mean?
Yeah, there's a little more room to play, and there's a little more room to maybe set the guy up and trap him for a lot of chips.
Now, rounding off the table, again, Barry is in 6th place with 447,000, but Jeffrey Garcia in 5th place. Garza, excuse me. Jeffrey Garza with 1.32 million. I heard some kids, or internet kids on the rail, talking about when we went in there, Gavin, that he's one of the top 3 tournament internet players out there, and he plays a lot of high stakes cash games now, but in his time when he was playing tournaments, he was very good, so you can imagine how many hands he's seen or how many tournaments he's played. I kind of know where your view on that is.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Gavin.
I'm just not so sure how relevant it is to be one of the top 3 online tournament players in wherever. In
a live tournament?
In a live tournament here, because it's just that it's just completely different. It's completely different when you're playing in your own living room, playing generally small buy-ins. Like the biggest buy-in tournament you're going to play online is a $2,500 buy-in, and you're going to play like 2 or 3 of those a year. Most of the time you're going to be playing these $200 Sunday events where you're playing against completely different competition under completely different circumstances. So, well, yeah, you may have seen a lot of hands and a lot of circumstances. I don't think a lot of it equates to what you have to do to experience the biggest buy-in tournaments in the world.
What do you think about Action Jeff, as they call him, Barry?
Yeah, well, he started out pretty rough. His first 3 hands he played, and I know he's an experienced player, young player, were bad. He got all in raising for 20 times the big blind with Queen 3 of clubs. He had to beat 2 6s. They were in the blinds. I don't think that was. I don't like the play, and he got lucky. He hit a queen on the river. Then against Cheryl, who's a tight player, he could have easily picked up a pot where she limped in the blinds on each street. Finally, she paired on the river, made a small value bet, and he called her with Jack high. Then the third hand was something, again, he made a bad play. And all I can say is I think he's a late riser. Because after that, he won a big pot, the pot with ace-king against ace-jack, where Kofi played me out of beating him a pot. And once he got a hold of those chips, I think he settled in and he said, oh, I actually have a shot to win this thing. And I think once he settled in, and it's very clear by his record online that he must know something about playing tournaments. And so I think he bets his hands well. That's what I've seen. And, I don't doubt. I think he said, I can't tell looking at him, he's a pretty big guy, that he's only 19. So if he's 19 and he's doing that well online, I'm sure we're gonna know about him more when he turns 21, and we're gonna see him.
I'm shocked that he's only 19.
Yeah, he doesn't look 19.
No, he doesn't at all. So, you got to give some of these 19-year-olds credit. They came here to more than you might initially think. They came here to Canada to play because they could play here. But the other thing you don't realize, it puts extra pressure on you when this is your World Series in some sense.
Right.
This is your one shot. So for them to make it this far with that kind of hanging on them, that they can't just send it in and then jump to Foxwoods and play in the next one.
Right.
That does put them at a disadvantage. And so, that tells you he's done a lot of good things to get to this point.
Now, we might see some of these guys at the PCA in Bahamas, right? That age is 19 as well.
That's right. They don't have that many tournaments to play in, and some of them have to go to Europe, and some of them are still in school, so they can't just go around.
And again, you are rounding off the final spot and sixth spot with 447,000. So let's do our predictions here, Gavin. Now, how have you guys done this in the past? Do we want to pick the top 3?
Now, traditionally, what we've done is we've read back the field, who we picked sixth to first, and we usually rotate the order. So I'm saying that since Barry won't be on the show with his forthcoming, that we'll let Barry go first, and then we can get into more of a
I've definitely, when I look at this, I see Barry Greenstein, who's got a sixth of the chip leader, and even compared to fifth place, I've only got a third of him. So I don't have a very high percentage of the chips, but I don't think any of these kids can play, and I am still picking myself to win this tournament.
Well, you gotta go from sixth to first. You don't pick yourself first.
Well,
who are you picking to come in sixth place?
Okay, so let's get that out of the way. So I'm picking myself first. Put it on record. I don't care that I'm the short stack. In sixth place, I have to pick Kofi just because he's so volatile. He's a guy that you'd almost pick to come in sixth or come in first, just the way he plays. He's not going to be playing for fourth, the Bart spot, as Gavin.
Or eighth at the World Series.
Yeah, right. At the World Series, same type of thing.
Yeah.
Kofi's in there dancing around. He's, probably going to get in a couple more races, and who knows what'll happen in the races, right? He might win or might lose them. He's going to have chips or go broke, and so I'm hoping that I'll get some chips there, and so he'll come in sixth. And then the next guy I picked for fifth, I picked Jeff Garza.
For fourth. You've already... Oh, no,
that's fifth. And not that I think he's a bad player. I'm obviously convinced he's a good player and who will only get better, because he's still young. But just because Jeff... Again, I think Jeff, now that he's here, is... he doesn't have as many chips as some of the other guys. And he is willing to make a play. And so with the extra volatility and not having as many chips as the leaders, I've got to put him fifth. David Cloutier, I'm putting fourth. And again, it's not that I think he plays better than Jeff. I don't think he does, but his game is less volatile. So he's a guy whose style kind of gears him to come in third or fourth. So that I expect him to be in the middle. Next, Jonathan Little's playing things pretty close to the vest. Clearly a good player, we already know based on his record. And choosing between Jonathan and Scott, I have no way to say who's the better player, and I don't have a good enough sample between them. But as I said, I think Scott has a slight advantage just because he's got to have the table thinking, maybe I shouldn't be firing at this guy because he's going to call me down. And also, if he picks up some hands, he's got people realizing he's willing to bluff in strange situations. So when you put what he's shown the table, that's why I move Scott ahead of Jonathan, not in any way saying that he's a better player or anything like that. So I put Jonathan third and Scott second.
All right. How about you, Gavin?
All right. I am going to pick in sixth place. I am going to also pick Kofi Farkey, just because I think he's going to get himself in some nutty spots. In fifth place, I'm going to take David Cloutier. I think he's going to be nervous tomorrow. I don't think he's going to react well, and I think it's going to be difficult for him. In fourth place, I'm going to take Jeffrey Garza.
You don't have to. You won't see me again on this show. You don't have to move.
Shut up, Mr. Third Place Finisher. I'm going to take the Bear in third place just because I think that the blinds are still good, and I think experience is going to show through a lot here. I think it's going to be a big thing. But then again, Jonathan Little and Scott Clements both also have a little bit of experience, and they both are coming in with chips, and I think they both can play pretty well. I think that Jonathan Little is going to play a different game tomorrow than he played today. I think he's going to turn it up a notch, and I think he's going to. I think it was a concern to him that he came seventh place in the last one, and I think that was an uncomfortable spot that he didn't want that to happen again. Nobody wants to be like Joe Seventhbach. So I don't think Jonathan Little wanted that to happen, and I think he's going to open it up a little more. That being said, I think Scott Clements has got a little something going on up here in Canada. He might be thinking about moving here after winning last year, and I think he's playing well. I think he's playing situations, and I think he's got the best seat in the table. I think that if Barry comes up with chips, the guy that's immediately on his left has got the best spot in the table, and I think that in the end that might end up being what propels Scott to victory. So I'm going to give Jonathan Little second and Scott Clements first.
Well, it's interesting because I've also picked Kofi in 6th place, and I think we, like Barry said, we could all be wrong because that one raise that he makes and somebody moves in over the top of him for less or more and he calls and he wins with a hand like ace-10 or ace-jack, well, now all of a sudden he's the chip leader. But I have a feeling that
might need that to happen more than once.
He's probably not going to get it in good. I just have that feeling, and, he's going to have to get a little lucky. I picked Cloutier coming in 5th place, the local guy. I picked Barry in 4th place because I think that Barry is going to, double up. Really pulling for you to double up, but, he's at a severe chip advantage. Obviously, he's going to make up some ground. Disadvantage, excuse me. Jonathan Little I picked for 3rd place. Wow. Jeffrey Garza, I pick him for second. I think he's a little bit, his online statistics are really something. And I know you say it's a live tournament, but I just think seeing so many hands and the experience is going to, he's had a lot of final table play, going to propel him to second. And I also picked Scott Clements here for first. I think he's got something going on here, definitely, and I think he's hot. So with that being said, those are our picks, and I believe that we are going to wrap it up here.
Those are our picks. And you know what? I'm not going to be upset if I lose the pool. I can handle losing the $100, but I'm still going to root for Barry to do well.
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah, because we've already had come on the show, make a final table. We haven't yet had host the show, win a WPT tournament, right?
Yeah,
that would be a good moniker to have.
That's right. Certainly, you want me to start that trend because it gives you guys the opportunity to do it after me.
So I want to thank everybody here at the casino at the Fallsview Casino and Resort. I had a great time. Went out and checked out the falls. Very, very nice. Great poker room that they've got going on here too, even though it's a little bit small. And I think consensus is they ran a pretty good tournament here, right?
Yeah, I think they do run a good tournament.
So we will see you at Foxwoods. So for Barry Greenstein, Gavin Smith, I'm Bart Hansen. See you next time, everybody, from Poker Road Radio.